2 hours after I buried my 8-year-old son, his teacher called me with a trembling voice. "Ma'am, I found something you need to see. Come to school and meet me in the staff office right now. Don't tell your family, don't tell anyone. This is dangerous." Her words froze my grief into something sharp and cold. When I finally reached the school, heart pounding in my throat, the figure standing in the doorway made me shake so hard I could barely breathe. I never imagined it would be my own husband. Before we go any further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss the next stories. Your support really helps the channel grow and keeps these kinds of stories coming. 2 hours after Noah's funeral, our house felt like a refrigerator full of flowers and whispers. Lilies and damp earth clung to my black dress while people drifted through the living room repeating the same lines. "He's in a better place, you have to be strong." Noah was 8, healthy, fast enough to win his first school race. The doctor said it was a sudden heart attack, a freak medical event. I didn't believe it, but I didn't have the strength to argue with a white coat or the chorus telling me to accept the unbearable. I hid in our bedroom, staring at Noah's photo with his little trophy, while outside, my husband Mark played the part everyone expected. He shook hands with guests, eyes red, shoulders sagging at exactly the right angle. People called him the rock of our shattered family. Through the crack in the door, I saw him embrace Mr. Harris, the powerful director of the foundation that ran Noah's school. It should have been comforting, but something in my chest tightened for no reason I could name. That was when my phone lit up with the name Ms. Parker, Noah's teacher. Her voice sounded like it came from the back of a closet. She said she'd found something in Noah's desk, something I had to see with my own eyes. She insisted I come to the school immediately and meet her in the staff office. Then came the part that made my blood run cold. I must not tell anyone I was coming, not even my own family. "Please," she whispered, "this is dangerous." In one heartbeat, my numb grief snapped into sharp, buzzing fear that drowned out the murmurs in the living room. I wiped my cheeks, walked out, and told Mark my head was splitting, that I needed my migraine pills from the car and a few minutes of air at the store by the gate. He offered to go instead, voice soft and persuasive, but I insisted I needed 15 minutes alone. Mr. Harris smiled kindly and told me not to stay out in the night air too long. I forced a smile, took my keys, and stepped into the drizzle, feeling every step away from the house as if I were walking off the edge of a cliff. The road to Noah's school felt endless. Rain turned the asphalt into a dark mirror, reflecting streetlights and fragments of my face in the windshield. What could Ms. Parker have found? Why was she so afraid? And why forbid me to tell Mark, the man everyone called the perfect father? For months, Noah had been tired and nauseous, complaining of stomach aches. Mark insisted it was stress, handled his vitamins himself, and snapped whenever I suggested a second opinion. I'd taken it as overprotectiveness. For the first time, that memory scared me more than the storm. The school looked wrong at night, the front gate hanging half open, the security booth empty. I parked under a big tree where my car would be hidden and hurried through the wet courtyard to the main building. Inside, the hallway was silent. The staff office was upstairs. The corridor lights were off, but a strip of light shone from beneath the office door. It wasn't fully closed. I moved closer, held my breath, and peered through the narrow gap, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear anything else. Ms. Parker was backed into a corner by a filing cabinet, face white, hands half raised as if to block a blow. A man stood with his back to me, blocking most of my view. I recognized the black shirt, the posture, the faint trace of his cologne. He held something small and dark in one hand and spoke in a low, hard voice I'd never heard from him before. When the door creaked under my weight, he spun around. The grieving mask I knew was gone, replaced by sharp, cold eyes. It was Mark. For a second, my legs almost gave out. Then his expression flipped back into wounded surprise, like a switch being thrown. "Grace, what are you doing here?" he asked, crossing the room as if to hug me. He said he couldn't stand being in the house, so he'd come to collect Noah's things before the classroom was cleared. It sounded so reasonable that if I hadn't seen Miss Parker's terror, I might have believed him. I looked past him. Her hands shook so badly she gripped the cabinet for support. When Mark shot her a warning glance, she flinched and rushed to agree with everything he said. She stammered that they'd been talking about how kind Noah had been. Sweat trickled down her temple despite the air conditioning, and she twisted the hem of her skirt until her knuckles turned white. Whatever Mark had been holding vanished into his pocket. He grabbed a small cardboard box from the desk, saying it held Noah's notebooks and pencils. then wrapped his arm around my shoulders a little too tightly and suggested we go home. As he turned toward the door, Ms. Parker stepped close, pretending to straighten my headscarf. Her cold fingers brushed my neck. I felt the faint pressure of a tiny folded piece of paper being slipped into the fabric at my shoulder. Her eyes locked onto mine, full of terror and urgency. Her lips formed one silent word, "Run." My heart lurched. Somehow I kept my face calm, thanked her, and followed Mark out. When he asked what we'd been talking about, I said she had told me to stay strong. He seemed satisfied. We left Miss Parker trembling in that office. I didn't know it was the last time I would see her alive. Back home, most of the guests had gone. I told Mark I needed to sleep and locked our bedroom door. Only when his footsteps faded down the hall did I pull the note from my scarf. The paper was torn from a school notebook, the handwriting rushed and jagged. Under the bedside lamp I read, "Noah did not die of a heart attack. His medicine was switched with slow-acting poison. Check the teddy bear in his room. He recorded something before he died. Be careful. Your husband is dangerous." The words punched the air out of my lungs so hard I fell to my knees. My son hadn't just died. He had been killed. And the man Ms. Parker feared was in our kitchen, probably making tea and accepting condolences. Rage pushed through the numbness. I forced myself up and slipped into Noah's room next door, closing and locking the door behind me. His scent hit me at once, that mix of shampoo and baby powder. Toys cluttered the floor, superheroes lined the walls, and on the bed sat his favorite brown teddy bear, the one he always hugged at night when I tucked him in. My hands shook as I picked up the bear and felt along the seams. On its back I found a clumsy line of stitches, as if someone had opened it and sewn it shut again with small, unskilled hands. I remembered how proud Noah had been the day he showed me the first button he'd sewn at school. I grabbed a pair of nail scissors from his desk and carefully cut the seam. Stuffing spilled out, and deep inside I found a tiny digital voice recorder, the spy toy my best friend Daniel had once bought him. I pressed play with a trembling thumb. Noah's voice came first, small and hoarse. He said his stomach hurt again after Daddy gave him the bitter red medicine, not like the pills I used to give. He was scared to tell me because Daddy got mad last time. Then the bedroom door opened on the recording and heavy steps crossed the floor. Mark's voice followed, calm and cold, talking on the phone. "Don't worry, Harris," he said. "The dose is higher now. The kid won't last the week. Once he's gone, the inheritance moves into my account and we split it. Make sure the foundation land papers are ready." The recording clicked off. My world did too. The real bedroom door rattled. "Grace," Mark's voice came from the hall, no longer gentle. "Why is this door locked? Open it." The handle shook harder. "Don't make me break it down." I shoved the recorder into my dress pocket and clutched the bear. If he came in and saw the open seam, the note, the horror on my face, I wouldn't live long enough to show anyone the truth. The window was my only way out. Noah's room was on the second floor, but a thick old tree grew close to the balcony, branches crooked like a ladder. Adrenaline drowned out my fear of heights. I threw open the window and cold rain slapped my face. Behind me, wood cracked as Mark rammed his shoulder into the door. I climbed over the balcony rail, grabbed the nearest wet branch, and hauled myself into the tree. My dress snagged. Bark scraped my hands, but I bit back any sound. Lightning flashed, turning the yard white for a heartbeat. I dropped onto the soaked grass, pressed myself against the trunk, then ran along the side of the house toward the small back gate the gardener used. In seconds I was out in the dark alley, barefoot and shaking, my phone buzzing with Mark's calls as I ran for the main road. At a gas station under harsh white light, I finally stopped and pulled out my phone. 10 missed calls from Mark glowed on the screen. I ignored them, scrolled through my contacts, and tapped on Daniel's name. We'd been friends since high school. Now he was an investigative journalist who knew exactly how men like Harris stayed untouchable. When he answered, I could barely speak. "Daniel, help me," I sobbed. "Mark killed Noah. Come to the gas station on the highway. Don't ask anything yet. Just come." 15 endless minutes later, his old gray sedan pulled up and I climbed in, soaked and shaking as he drove us away from the neighborhood that used to be my whole world. As the city lights thinned, my words finally spilled out. I told him about the call from Ms. Parker, the scene at the school, the note, the teddy bear, Noah's recording, Mark's calm confession. Daniel listened in tight-lipped silence, hands white-knuckled on the wheel. When I played the recording, he swore and pulled the car onto the shoulder, punching the steering wheel in fury. He opened his mouth to say we'd go straight to the police, but the radio cut to a breaking news bulletin. A teacher named Rachel Parker had been found dead in the schoolyard, early reports calling it suicide after a fall from the 3rd floor. The word suicide made my stomach churn. Ms. Parker had been terrified, not suicidal. They had silenced her. Guilt hit almost as hard as grief. If I'd arrived sooner, if I'd begged her to leave with me, maybe she'd still be alive. Daniel held me while I cried, but somewhere in that storm something inside me hardened. My grief stopped drowning me and turned into something cold and precise. Daniel knew Harris had friends in the police and coroner's office. If we walked in with one illegal recording, it might disappear, and so might we. I don't want them just in prison, I whispered. I want them ruined. I want them afraid. That night, in Daniel's late uncle's dusty apartment on the edge of the city, we began to plan. I cut my hair shorter, traded my funeral dress for jeans and a loose work jacket, and tucked Noah's recorder into a safe place. We forged an ID badge and slipped my fake name into the cleaning roster for the Harris Foundation building where Mark worked as operations director. I told Daniel about the safe behind the abstract painting in Mark's office and how, ironically, he'd chosen Noah's birthday as the code. We needed real documents and a way to force them to condemn themselves where no one could bury the evidence. On Friday, I slipped in with the cleaning crew through the service entrance, pushing a cart of mops and buckets. Nobody looked twice at me. The service elevator carried me to the executive floor, down a hushed hallway to Mark's office. Using a cloned access card Daniel had made from a careless assistance badge, I let myself in. Our perfect family photo still hung behind his desk, smiling down on a room that smelled like expensive cologne. I pulled down the abstract painting on the side wall, revealing the digital safe, and typed in Noah's birthday. A green light blinked and the door swung open. There was no medicine bottle, but there were stacks of property deeds, envelopes of cash, and multiple passports. I swallowed my disappointment and quickly photographed every document with the tiny camera hidden in my shirt button. The papers showed how Harris and Mark had siphoned land and money from the foundation into shell companies, enough to destroy their reputations, but maybe not enough to prove murder. Footsteps and laughter sounded in the hall. I shut the safe, rehung the painting, slid behind the big leather sofa and pretended to scrub the floor just as the door opened and Mark walked in with his young assistant, Chloe. They didn't notice me. What I heard made my blood boil. Mark poured himself a drink while Chloe perched on his desk, stroking his arm. They talked about Noah's death like it was a successful operation. Chloe praised his acting at the funeral. Mark called Noah a sick little anchor, blocking the inheritance my father had left, the one meant for my son. He bragged that the poison bottle had already been burned with medical waste, and that Harris had the police and medical examiner in his pocket. As they spoke, I switched on a tiny audio bug in my pocket and captured every vile word. When they left for lunch, I waited until the hall was quiet, then emerged on shaking legs. Before I left, I placed one of Noah's toy cars in the center of Mark's immaculate desk, a tiny bright reminder that his past wasn't buried. Back at the apartment, Daniel listened to the recording and scrolled through the photos. The evidence was powerful, but messy. Illegal recordings, hacked files, proof of corruption that expensive lawyers might still twist. We need them to confess where no one can bury it, he said. We need them scared enough to destroy each other. Mark had one weakness I knew well. He was secretly terrified of ghosts and punishment, even while he mocked them in public. With Daniel's help, we hacked into the smart home system Mark had installed. Cameras, lights, speakers, thermostat. The fortress he'd built to feel safe became our stage. Night after night, we made the lights flicker, the temperature drop, Noah's laughter and whimpers echo faintly from the walls, his recorded plea about the bitter red medicine playing while Mark showered. Within days, he was stumbling through the house at midnight, shouting at empty rooms, snapping at Chloe and begging Harris to make it stop. While he spiraled, we prepared our main attack, the annual Harris Foundation Gala at a 5-star hotel. Harris planned to hand Mark an award for Father of the Year, praising his dedication despite tragedy. The hypocrisy made me sick, but it also gave us a room full of donors, officials, and cameras. Daniel found a weakness in the hotel's Wi-Fi and seized control of the main projector and sound system. We cut together a short, brutal video, red letters on black spliced with audio from Mark's office, no narration needed, And if you've stayed with me this far, hit the like button and subscribe, and tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place. On gala night, we watched the live feed from a van in the parking lot, screens flickering in front of us. Mark arrived with Harris, thinner and jumpier, eyes darting at shadows. Chloe followed, clearly frightened by his paranoia. When Harris finally called Mark on stage to receive his award, the audience clapped politely, unaware they were about to watch his mask shatter. Mark took the crystal trophy with shaking hands and began a polished speech about how much he loved and missed Noah, his voice cracking at precisely rehearsed moments. On my signal, Daniel hit a key. The slideshow behind Mark froze, then dissolved into static before a single sentence appeared in dripping red. "I know what you did." Gasps rippled through the ballroom. Mark turned and stared at the screen. Then his own voice filled the speakers, clear and undeniable, laughing with Chloe, calling Noah an anchor, boasting that the poison was gone and they had won. Chloe screamed and sank into her chair. Harris went rigid, face draining of color as donors and journalists raised their phones to record every second. Mark grabbed the microphone, shouting that it was edited, fake, a cruel joke. But no one listened. In his panic, he spotted Harris whispering to security, clearly ready to throw him under the bus. Mark snapped, pointing at his father-in-law and screaming that they'd planned it together, that Harris had arranged the poison and promised him half the money. The room erupted. That was all we needed. Back at the apartment, we bought 2 burner phones and set the final trap, trusting that fear and greed would drag both men into the same cage. On one phone, pretending to be Mark, we texted Harris. "I have original documents you signed. Help me escape tonight and pay my share, or they go to the prosecutor tomorrow. Meet me at the old Foundation warehouse at the docks at 2 a.m. Come alone, or we both burn." On the other, posing as one of Harris's fixers, we texted Mark. "Mr. Harris has a boat ready to take you out tonight. Bring all evidence so we can destroy it. Meet at the old warehouse, 2 a.m. Police are moving. Don't be late." Daniel also contacted a detective he trusted in the Serious Crimes Unit, sending a sample of our recordings and the warehouse details. Rain hammered the roof of the abandoned warehouse when we slipped inside and climbed to a metal catwalk overlooking the dusty floor. Daniel planted tiny cameras and microphones, all streaming straight to a secure police server. At 2:10, a black sedan rolled in. Harris stepped out with 2 bodyguards, then ordered them to wait outside and walked in alone, one hand on a small case, the other hovering near his jacket. He stood beneath a hanging bulb, checking his watch, jaw clenched tight, like a man who had decided someone would die tonight. Minutes later, the main door creaked again. Mark limped inside, clothes rumpled, eyes wild from days of fear. He looked around for the promised boat, found only Harris and the echoing walls, and his face crumpled. "Where's the way out?" he rasped. Harris laughed, brittle and furious. He said Mark had humiliated him in front of everyone and that he would never risk saving him. Then he demanded the documents Mark had threatened him with. Mark realized he'd been trapped and bluffed, that he'd recorded all their conversations, that killing him would send everything to the media. "You poisoned your own son," Harris shouted, his voice ringing up to our hiding place. "I told you to manage the inheritance, not murder your blood." "Don't act clean," Mark screamed back. "You introduced me to the guy with the poison. You told me to raise the dose so it wouldn't drag on. You needed my father-in-law's money to cover your debts. We're both in this." They even spat out that the nosy teacher had to be dealt with. Every word poured straight into the police recorders. Finally, Harris snapped, drew a pistol, and leveled it at Mark's head. Before he could fire, sirens wailed outside, red and blue lights strobing through gaps in the metal walls. A loudspeaker ordered them to drop their weapons. Harris hesitated and glanced at the door. Mark lunged, tackling him. The gun skidded across the concrete. They grappled on the floor until Mark, younger and stronger, knocked Harris out cold. Instead of surrendering, he staggered to his feet and looked up. In the dim light, he saw the shine of our camera lens, and above that, my face. Understanding crashed over him. The haunting, the messages, the gala, this trap. It had all been me. He bolted for the metal stairs, climbing toward us with terrifying speed despite his limp. "Run!" Daniel hissed, grabbing my hand. We sprinted along the catwalk to the roof door. It burst open under Daniel's shoulder, and we stumbled into wind and rain. The roof was 3 stories up, the river black and fast on one side, police cars blocking the street on the other. There was a rusted fire escape that could take us down, but before we reached it, the door behind us exploded open again. Mark emerged, face smeared with blood, gripping a length of metal pipe like a bat. Daniel stepped between us. The pipe slammed into his arm with a crack, dropping him to his knees. I screamed his name, but Mark grabbed my scarf and yanked me backward toward the edge. Pain tore through my scalp. Below, officers shouted, guns raised but afraid to shoot. Mark pressed a jagged shard of glass he grabbed from the roof against my throat. The cut was shallow but hot. He screamed for money, a helicopter, a free path. Demands from a man who knew he'd already lost. The negotiator's calm voice floated through a megaphone, but Mark only tightened his grip and dragged me toward the fire escape. He used my body as a shield all the way down to a battered SUV parked near the river, shoved me into the passenger seat, and tied my wrists to the grab handle with his tie. Police cars swarmed behind us as he floored the gas. Rain turned the chase into a blur of light and water. He ran red lights, bounced off barriers, nearly hit other cars. Finally, he barreled onto an elevated bridge under repair, concrete walls narrowing the lanes. Ahead, police cars formed a solid barricade. He swerved to avoid them. The SUV skidded on slick pavement, spun and smashed sideways into the guardrail. Metal screamed. The windshield shattered. My head hit the frame and everything went white for a moment. When my vision cleared, we were half crumpled against the barrier, police closing in on foot. Mark dragged me out, hauling me to the edge, pressing the glass back to my throat. The river gushed below like a dark mouth. The wind whipped rain into our faces. Oddly, I felt very calm. Fear had burned itself out. I thought of Noah in his little coffin, of Miss Parker falling alone. They'd had no chance to fight. I did. Mark's right leg hung at a wrong angle from the crash. His weight rested mostly on the left. I took a slow breath, twisted my body toward him, and sank my teeth into the arm holding the shard, ignoring the sting as the glass cut deeper. I bit down with everything I had until the taste of blood filled my mouth. Mark screamed and yanked back on instinct. The glass dropped from his fingers and clinked onto the concrete. Before he could recover, I lifted my foot and kicked his ruined knee as hard as I could. Something cracked. He howled and collapsed, rolling away from the edge. Officers surged in, dragging me back as others piled onto him. Still he fought, grabbing for a gun until a single shot to his other thigh finally ended his struggle. Later I learned his injuries, and the filthy water forced doctors to amputate his right leg, and complications left him confined to a wheelchair. Harris, arrested at the warehouse, suffered a massive stroke during interrogation, leaving him paralyzed and barely able to speak. Chloe was caught at the airport with bags full of jewelry, and no charm could save her from a long sentence. Months passed, scars formed. When Mark and Harris finally faced trial, the courtroom was packed. I sat beside Daniel as the judge read the charges. Premeditated murder of a child, conspiracy to murder a witness, fraud, corruption. Mark received the death penalty. Harris got life without parole. Chloe was sentenced to 20 years. I didn't cheer. I simply felt something heavy lift from my chest. The inheritance my father had left in Noah's name, plus the assets seized from Mark and Harris, were now legally mine. I couldn't bring myself to use money soaked in my son's blood for my own comfort. Instead, with Daniel's help, I bought and renovated an old building on the edge of the city. We painted the walls bright colors, filled the rooms with beds, books, and toys, and put up a sign, Noah's House, Center for Child Protection and Learning. It became a shelter and school for children hurt or abandoned by the adults who should have loved them. Every laugh in that building felt like a small victory for Noah. We also funded a new library at Noah's old school and named it the Rachel Parker Library, so the teacher who died trying to save him would be remembered as a hero, not a suicide. The day the library opened, children rushed in to touch the books, their voices echoing through the hall. For the first time in a long while, the sound of children's laughter didn't break me. It healed me. One soft golden evening, Daniel and I went to the cemetery where Noah and Miss Parker were buried side by side under a flowering tree. The grass on their graves was thick and green now, sprinkled with flowers people had left after following the case. I knelt beside Noah's stone and traced his name with my fingers. There were no sobs this time, only an ache that had finally learned to live with itself. "It's done, sweetheart," I whispered. "They've been punished. Your money is helping other kids. You don't have to be sick anymore. You can play as much as you want." As I stood, the sinking sun sent long beams through the branches. For a heartbeat at the end of the path, I saw a small boy in superhero pajamas, healthy and bright-eyed, raising his hand in a shy little wave. My breath caught, but there was no fear. Whether it was my imagination or something more, I took it as his way of saying thank you and goodbye. A single tear slid down my cheek, warm instead of bitter. I lifted my hand and waved back. "Goodbye, Noah," I murmured. "I'm okay now." When I looked again, he was gone, folded back into the light, but the warmth remained in my chest. Daniel waited a few steps away, giving me space. I walked to him and he took my hand. Together we left the cemetery, the weight of the past finally behind us. Ahead, the city lights blinked on one by one, and for the first time, the road in front of me didn't look like a tunnel of grief. I wasn't just a widow or a victim anymore. I was Grace, founder of Noah's House, a mother who had walked through hell and come back carrying other children out of the fire with her.